Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 18th of October, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I know you're all probably sick of me talking about the censorship stuff on Ethereum, but it's topical, right? So I think I'm going to keep talking about it as long as there's something interesting to talk about. Well, I've got a couple of things here. So firstly is this thread from TM Basil Genevieve, going through the ETH censorship as kind of, a broad case here, like taking a macro view of things here. And they start off the thread by saying ETH censorship is 95% FUD to 5% to-do list, and they continue, people asked me my opinion on the 51% censored blocks, MEV watch graph that's been making the rounds, so here goes. No original opinions here, this topic is well covered and well understood. I'll link those resources at the end. And to be honest, even though there's no quote-unquote original opinions and probably not something that you haven't heard me talk about before or other people talk about before, it's still a really great thread packing together a bunch of really great points here. Now, what really spoke to me from this thread, really at the heart of it, is something that other people have been saying lately as well, and that's the practical censorship that's happening. So right now, obviously, 50% or around 51% of blocks that are being produced, of all blocks that are being produced, what's called quote-unquote OFAC compliant, right? And this is coming from the MEV boost relays that are censoring, obviously Flashbots being the main offender here. But even though that's the case, as I've explained before, you're still not practically censored from Ethereum, right? Still not practically censored from interacting with the Tornado Cash addresses or smart contracts or whatever address it is, the ones that are on the sanctions list, right? And this is because, as I've explained before, the way that the block production works is that 50% of the blocks aren't going to be produced by those validators that are censoring, right? So they'll be produced by uncensoring validators, which means that in the most cases, within 3 blocks, most of the transactions should be processed because of the law of probability there. And I explained this yesterday, but I think it's worth refreshing it there. So for all in practical purposes, everyone is still able to get their Tornado Cash transactions in, even if the total amount of censoring going on was, the total amount of blocks that are being censored, I should say, was like 95% plus. You would have to wait longer, obviously, than 3 blocks. You'd probably have to wait a few minutes at that point. Blocks are every 12 seconds. What we call them slots in proof of stake. It's the same thing. It's not technically the same thing, but just for the sake of argument here. But you'd still be able to get it in, right? So I think that's a really important point that I've talked about a lot, but this thread goes through as well. And on that note as well, it's also worth, realizing that there's different levels of censorship, right? There's different forms of it that it can take. Things will affect different people in different ways. That's why I've always taken the zero tolerance policy to censorship, right? I've always said, well, we shouldn't tolerate any censorship, and we should do what we can, on everything that we can, to eliminate as much of the censorship vectors on Ethereum. And obviously we're doing that with all the other solutions that I mentioned before, but I still think it's worth giving this thread a read because it's got a lot of great points here, got a lot of great resources, and it will probably frame things for you in a much more structured way than you may have heard of it before. I know on the Refuel, given it's unscripted, I can be a bit jumpy all over the place, or very jumpy all over the place with a lot of my points because I'm just trying to get all the information out there. But yeah, I think all these charts that you're seeing, I mean, the MEVWatch.info website is awesome. Like, you guys have all seen it, right? It was shared in the Discord channel, the Daily Gwei Discord channel, when I shared it on the Refuel. I think it's an awesome resource for monitoring this sorts of stuff. But what ends up happening, unfortunately, is that people who don't like Ethereum, people who are trying to spread a narrative, are going to use this as ammo against it, because you can post something like, I don't know, don't include all blocks, right? You can untick include all blocks, and you can see here that 90% of relay blocks are enforcing OFAC compliance. And that makes the block visualization look like this, right? All the red is obviously the censored blocks, green is the uncensored blocks, or the ones enforcing OFAC censorship or not enforcing OFAC censorship. If you just share this picture on Twitter, right, and you put like a bit of a FUD text around it, then people are going to think that, Ethereum is basically censored, Ethereum is Fed chain, whatever, because there's no nuance to this at all. There is no explaining exactly what OFAC censorship means here, like exactly what's being censored. It's not delineating between the relayed blocks and all blocks. If you go all blocks, you can see here, I mean, obviously it's going to be 50-50 because of all blocks, 50 ish percent is enforcing OFAC compliance. It's 52% right now. It hovers between 50 and 52% over the past couple of days from what I've seen. It's going to look like this. So it's going to look a little bit better, right? But it's not going to look that much better. But still, like, that looks absolutely horrible, right? When you look at it like that. But again, this doesn't show any nuance either. So I think while this resource is awesome, just like any resource, just like any metrics or statistics, it's going to be taken out of context. It's going to always be shared to push a certain narrative. And we've been dealing with this since, I guess, these things existed, right? This is nothing new. And on that note as well, I think when you see these sorts of things, not just about censorship, but about anything really, when you see someone trying to push a narrative using one data point or one chart that makes things look bad, always question it. Don't just take it at face value, because usually the person sharing it, as I said, is trying to push their own agenda, their own narrative, and you need to look at things with a nuanced lens. But yeah, anyway, you can go check out this thread from TM here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But speaking of those solutions to censorship that I've been speaking about over the past, I guess, few weeks, Terrence from Prylabs here said, or put out a tweet today saying, together with the legend Marius here from the Geth team, we have started prototyping features to enable the proposer to select between a local block and a builder block with the highest fee. The first step for censorship resistance. And there is a linked GitHub repo here. And now in the replies as well, Vitalik has basically expanded on this, saying, next step, proposer locally scans the mempool and checks if there are any transactions that pay a sufficient priority fee but have not been included in more than 3 non-full blocks. If so, proposer always favors local block if the builder block does not include all those transactions. Translation, as I said before, most of the, as it currently stands, most of the Tornado Cash transactions will be included within 3 blocks, right? Because of the law of probabilities, because only 50-ish% is censoring, you have a 50-50, you have basically a coin flip chance every block of getting your transaction included. Now, as Vitalik says here, if it's been greater than 3 blocks and a transaction that has paid a sufficient priority fee, as in a priority fee that should have guaranteed an inclusion in 1 to 2 blocks, but it hasn't been included in more than 3 non-full blocks, well, you can have relative certainty that that's because it's potentially being censored, right? So in that case, you would favor that. So the proposer would favor that local block if the builder block does not include all those transactions as a way to mitigate censorship. And then Vitalik continues by saying, it would be cool to spec this out and at least try it to see how reliable this kind of mempool scanning is and how often such inclusion failures happen, quote unquote, accidentally, right? Because you can never have guarantees around why something wasn't included. Like, just because a transaction wasn't included in 3 or more blocks, even though it paid a sufficient priority fee, doesn't necessarily mean it was being censored, right? But as I said, we can have relative certainty. And also, I mean, it's just a good thing regardless, being able to make sure that all the transactions are being included as they should, given that they pay the sufficient priority fee, right? Like, you guys know with EIP 1559, there's 2 types of fees that work in conjunction. There's the base fee, which is the same for everyone, and then there, well, I mean, it's just it's a floating. It's obviously floating, but like the base fee is the fee that everyone has to pay, and then you pay a priority fee on top of that. Normally, it's defaulted to like 1, but if you want to get your transactions in faster and you want to guarantee inclusion in the next block, then you would pay a higher priority fee, and that's what Vitalik is basically saying here with regards to censorship. So, as I said, there's plenty of solutions being worked on. Some of them require hard forks, some of them don't. Some of them are coming soon, some of them are coming later. I honestly think that shutterized beacon chain or the private mempool stuff is one of the best solutions that we have that shouldn't take as long as something like PBS to come out. And just a refresher for those who don't know, the shutterized beacon chain is this concept of all the transactions are submitted into the mempool, whether it be through a relay mempool or the public mempool, and they're private. So you don't know what's in the contents of these transactions. You don't know what's in the contents of these bundles that are sent to the relays, which means that the validators have plausible deniability over what to include in blocks. So just say I've submitted all these Tornado Cash transactions, but the thing is only I know that. Only I know what those transactions are. The validators on the network don't know, so they're just going to default include everything based on, obviously, the fees paid. That's how it should be. So I don't know how complex that is to implement. I believe it's maybe not less complex, but like I believe it's more realistic to get something like that into the protocol before PBS. But again, I'm not entirely sure here. But that solution just seems really, really cool to me because As I've discussed before, there are the two types of censorship: inclusion censorship and attestation level censorship. The shutterized beacon chain won't do anything against attestation level censorship because of the fact of the matter is, like, once the transaction is actually on chain, it's no longer private. It's only private while it sits in the mempool, or like the pending transactions pool, right? So while it sits there, it's completely private, which means validators don't know what they're including and can't pick and choose, right? But once it gets into blocks, well, then it's in a block. The validators can see what blocks they're attesting to. They can see what transactions were included in that block. But as I've explained before, attestation level censorship is next level. Like, it is so totally, I guess, different to inclusion censorship. And it's actually much worse. And there are in-protocol mitigations for that, on top of the social slashing as a last line of defense that we have there. Unless the last resort, the nuclear strike, so to speak. So there's all of that stuff on top of this. But very cool to see that core devs are taking this seriously. They're working on these solutions. I think what they're doing is they're trying to find as many short-term solutions as possible, because they know that these other solutions like PBS and CR lists are going to take longer to deploy out. So they're working on what they can right now in order to mitigate this, which is very, very cool. And I've seen a few people throw out conspiracy theories. And I think I mentioned it yesterday about Flashbots censoring on purpose in order to push people to take censorship resistance more seriously. I mean, that's a nice narrative to tell ourselves if we want to believe that. If you want to believe that reality, go for it, right? But like, I personally don't believe that to be the case. But I do believe that Flashbots themselves as well are doing everything they can to make it so that these relays can't censor, right? These relays can't censor, or there's no incentive to, or can have that deniability and have that protection, I guess, like that legal protection, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. These people running the relays are choosing between running afoul of OFAC and providing a service. And at the end of the day, like, no one wants to run afoul of OFAC. As I've said before, the penalties are quite large for that. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to end that there on the censorship discussion. There's a bunch of other things to get through, which starting with a interesting tweet from Toggle, who works as a senior researcher at Scroll. So Toggle was quote tweeting Richard, who said, "No amount of quote unquote fractal scaling is going to remove the need for a fast L1. Assuming mass adoption, it's inevitable that someday millions of users will simultaneously migrate state from to L1, absolutely crippling a slow base layer." So obviously Richard doesn't really understand much here, unfortunately. And then Toggle quote tweeted him and said, "Base layers should be decentralized and affordable to run on as modest hardware as possible. You can make the layers deployed on top of it quote unquote fast by adding economic finality guarantees. However, you can't make a fast base layer decentralized if it requires a supercomputer to run a full node." And as I've talked about before, right, as I've mentioned before, the reason why Ethereum Layer 1 is being, I guess, kept the way it is to allow people to run full nodes on consumer-grade hardware. I mean, that's really the heart of it. And we know now, especially over the last year or so, that scaling via that modular approach of separating those concerns out, scaling via Layer 2s, Layer 3s, fractal scaling, that all is a reality. That's no longer a pipe dream. That's actually being worked on. Some of it's live in some forms, right? We have the Layer 2s live on mainnet. So we don't need to make these, compromises here. And unfortunately, Richard didn't really want to have an intellectual debate, with Toggle here. He replied saying, "Are the supercomputers in the room with us right now?" Which is obviously a smart-ass reply. But yeah, I mean, there is definitely a big philosophical divide between certain parts of the community. You got the Layer 1 shills, maybe shills isn't the right word, Layer 1 maximalists who think that you can do everything on Layer 1 and it's all well and good. And then you got the people on the other side, the modular camp, so obviously the monolithic modular dichotomy there, that think that obviously we want to keep Layer 1 decentralized, so we can't do everything on Layer 1, and we'll just scale at the different layers there. And this is topical to today because the Aptos, the Solana killer, launched on mainnet today. I mean, I'm not going to spend any time shitting on Aptos because it's already been done to death on Twitter today, but it speaks to what I was saying about there's always going to be another blockchain that comes out and says, "Hey, we're faster, cheaper, more scalable, better than this other chain that claimed to be that before." First, I mean, in terms of like the ones that got the most attention, really first it was EOS. Then it was, I mean, there was a bunch of others around there at that time as well, but then it was Solana, and now it's like Aptos and these other ones like Sui and Sei, right? And you basically are progressively making your way back towards being a centralized database. That's it. You're basically, it's kind of funny. You have that spectrum, and each time one of these things comes out, it just looks more and more like AWS, right? And it doesn't really add any value here. It doesn't add anything to the ecosystem. All it does is attempt to extract even more money from gullible people in this ecosystem. By spinning up one of these new layer ones. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to recap that because I hadn't spoken about that in a little while. All right, so an update on what's been going on with the ETH issuance numbers. So 6,500 ETH, or $8.5 million, has been issued since merge, including the burn, whereas under proof of work, so if it was still on proof of work since the merge, it would have been 400,000 ETH, which is $528 million, including the burn as well. That is a 98.4% reduction in ETH issuance in just over 4 weeks. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I know inevitably whenever I say these, people are like, oh, but what about the price? The price hasn't gone up at all. The price is just sideways. Guys, if there's one thing that price does, it's lag fundamentals, right? Like the market is not efficient enough to price things in. Like I've never believed the meme of things being priced in, because I've explained this plenty of times on the refuel, but the I guess like the main reason I don't believe that is because you could take just one look at crypto Twitter and see how many people are just constantly confused about this ecosystem, and that is the general population, right? That is the general kind of narrative that falls out there. So how can any of this ever be priced in? I mean, even people seeing my tweet here, they probably don't even understand what the impact of this is, because they're probably still thinking short term. They're like, oh, this hasn't done anything for the ETH price. This doesn't mean anything. But it will. Like, we've removed $500 million of potential sell pressure, right? And a lot of the times what ends up happening is that miners will, the miners obviously sold to cover costs, but during bearish periods, they'd be more inclined to stockpile what they can if they believe that there'd be another bull market, so they could sell into that, right? And obviously, as the price went higher, they were mining the same amount of ETH, and then that ETH denominated in USD actually went higher and higher. So they ended up needing to sell. They ended up selling into that liquidity, and it just put so much sell pressure on the market. We're not going to have that the next time demand comes back. We've already removed potentially $500 million of sell pressure. So what ends up happening is that when demand comes back, logically, and I mean, I think this makes total sense. It's not investment advice, but I think it makes sense. The price should trade much lighter on the way up. It should go up much easier, because you don't have that massive amounts of sell pressure there. But in the short to medium term, I said this for so long on the refuel. I said this for so long before the merge. Short to medium term, I never expected it to like pump automatically, especially if we were already in a bear market, especially given the bear market that we're in right now, right? So just for like the thing I tell people is just like patience. Like, if you're a long-term investor, short-term price shouldn't matter to you at all, and you will understand that these fundamentals here of this issue introduction are actually going to play out. They're just not going to play out during bear markets, because the demand is basically still zero. But it's not going to. I mean, if you believe it's not going to be like that forever, well, then you believe that the reduction in over $500 million worth of potential sell pressure is going to play a big part in that as well. All right, on to some layer 2 updates. So today, zkSync announced that they have successfully completed milestone 3 of their roadmap, which is proof merging. With the integration of validity proofs, zkSync 2.0 is officially the world's first ever zkVM running on a public testnet. Everyone says they're the world's first zkVM running on a testnet. I'm not even going to debate this anymore. People can say what they want. I still think it's cool to see another zkVM running on a public testnet, right? With validity proofs running as well. I believe zkSync 2.0 is very close to launching. What is it? It's not even... It was 17 days on October 12th. It's October 18th. It's only 11 days away, guys, until zkSync 2.0 launches on mainnet, which is very exciting. It means we get yet another one of these layer 2s on mainnet and a zkVM on mainnet, right? Obviously, there's a bunch of other teams working on zkVMs, but I'm excited to see zkSync's implementation of it. There's a lot of hype behind zkSync right now, and I often wonder, is that hype because zkSync has already announced that they're going to do a token and everyone's trying to farm the token, or are people genuinely interested in zkSync's ecosystem? I think it's a bit of both. It always really is. I mean, the same is true for any of these layer 2s. Same is obviously true for Arbitrum and Optimism. Arbitrum doesn't have a token yet, Optimism does, but it still plays into it, right? We all know tokens can be incredibly powerful even in bear markets. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this going live very, very soon. And congrats to zkSync for getting to milestone 3 on their roadmap. All right, so an announcement out of Optimism today. So the OP stack has been announced, which is a technical complement to the optimistic vision. So the TLDR on the OP stack is that it is a set of modular components that can be assembled to build custom chains to fit any use case. And they refer to them as OP chains. So basically, it's taking Optimism software and creating a whole stack out of it, obviously using Bedrock, which is their major upgrade going live relatively soon, and letting people build whatever they want. So essentially, let's take an example here. If you want to build your own Optimism chain, right? If you want to build your own layer 2, well, you can use this OP stack to do that. So for example, instead of DYDX being like, oh, well, we want to go to Cosmos and build our own sovereign chain using the Cosmos SDK, they could be like, hey, we want to build our own layer 2 using the OP stack. And I've talked about this before with like Stacker Network and Polygon's SDK. So it's really cool to see Optimism joining the fray here. Arbitrum has their own thing as well. And it feels like a no-brainer. Like if you want more people to use your tech, develop on your tech, and grow your ecosystem, you need to give the tools to these people to be able to do that. You need to give the tools to developers to be able to do that. So there's already been some things built on with the OP stack. So you can see here that announced that DevCon 6, Lattice turned Bedrock into a crafting-based voxel game where every single action is an on-chain transaction. So basically a Minecraft clone using Bedrock, using Optimism's Bedrock technology, which is very, very cool. And then a team of hackers also made a fork of Bedrock where the execution engine is swapped out with a Game Boy emulator, effectively building a Game Boy roll-up. I've said it before, but gaming on rollups and layer 2s is going to be absolutely massive. It's going to unlock so much really, really cool stuff on there. And we've really only scratched the surface. And I'm not talking about like all these Web3 NFT shield games that you've seen everywhere. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally a paradigm shift in how games are created, the infrastructure that backs these games up, how people interact with it, beyond just having, NFTs, like beyond that, like literally the back end of it, not just the front end that users see, but also the back-end infrastructure behind it. And there's a lot of this stuff going on Starknet, as I've highlighted before, but it's cool to see this stuff happening on Optimism as well. And I believe Arbitrum and Polygon, I mean, the gaming stuff is such a huge TAM. Like, the total addressable market for gaming is billions of people. I mean, how many people... Like, gaming has not just... has become more than just, like, your consoles and your PC. It's become your phone. Most people do gaming on their phone. So could you imagine an app that you can download on your phone that uses Layer 2 as its infrastructure, as its back-end infrastructure, integrated with NFTs and everything like that, and people can play these games on their phones and get value out of them. I know a lot of the mobile games are basically casinos, like they're just the gacha things where essentially you have to buy items to progress in the game and stuff like that. But I mean, who are we to say what people should and shouldn't do with their money and what fun they should and shouldn't have? But for me, I'm more interested in the uniquely enabled, game worlds that can be created here. Dark Forest is a good example of this. They were on a side chain. They're one of the first crypto games to actually do something novel with their kind of like planet conquering stuff with zk technology. But they're actually, I believe, going to be building on a roll-up. I don't know if that's been they've detailed that much, but I believe I read something about this a while ago that they were building something on layer 2. So that's really cool as well. But yeah, we haven't really seen anything yet. There's going to be a Cambrian explosion in this sort of stuff. Will there be enough demand to justify how many of these things come out? Who knows? We won't know until we basically test the waters. So I'm super excited for this. I'll link the OP Stack thread in the YouTube description below. There's also a blog post as well you can go check out. All right, so something really cool that I came across today was posted by satoshi.testaccount.eth, which is a website called bdl.eth.limo, which is a Windows 98 online emulator via an ENS domain. So you can see, I've got the website up here actually. You can see the classic Windows 98 interface here, or GUI here, and you click on My Computer, it'll kind of, I haven't actually done this yet, so I'm wondering what it opens up or what it attempts to do. It's probably just gonna completely lag out and not really do anything. It's not really, I don't think it's doing anything right now. Oh, no, it did. It just minimized it. So, okay, it's got like a full-blown emulation going on here. So you can see the C drive has popped up and you can go into different folders. It's a little bit slow, or very slow actually. I don't think I can click into the folders. No, it's not letting me click into the folders. But anyway, that's there. There's a few other apps. 3D pipes. I'm sure everyone remembers this. Oh god, what have I done? Oh, okay, that's gone. Okay, so it's like not totally working, but I thought it was still cool to see this running on like an ETH domain using the ETH.limo resolver here, which I've talked about before. Let's see if Solitaire works actually. Solitaire. So for some reason everything's starting minimized, but Damn, this is slow. I guess the server that it's running on is powered by a potato. Oh yeah, there we go. Solitaire. I have completely forgotten how to play solitaire. I'm not even gonna attempt that. And you got Minesweeper. But yeah, I mean, I just thought this was something cool that I wanted to highlight for you guys. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this one, but you can check it out yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, last up here, Bankless put out a good resource today that I recommend checking out that basically is David recapping Bankless's DevCon 6 experience. So it's titled What You Missed at DevCon. It's got the best talks, experiences, David's best, things that he saw at DevCon, all for you in this newsletter. So, I mean, I highly recommend going and checking this out if you're looking for a curated resource of talks you should watch. There's a lot here, actually. So maybe on your walk or jogs or whatever you're doing at the gym, you should give those a listen and check all that out because there was a lot of really great talks. I'm definitely going to be doing this because unfortunately I didn't make it to DevCon. But yeah, just wanted to highlight this for you guys here. Now, I have a few minutes left here, so I wanted to talk about something. The censorship stuff I've spoken about a lot, so I'm not going to rehash it there. But don't let the censorship stuff, I'm going to talk about it in the context of something else now. I don't let the censorship stuff cloud or undersell what Ethereum is doing right now. So take away the censorship stuff for a minute and think about everything else that's happening in Ethereum right now. We have obviously the successful merge that has kicked on just fine. Nothing's gone wrong with it since we merged. It's been over 4 weeks now. Everything's well and good. We have all these layer 2s just absolutely killing it. They're releasing all their new updates. They're coming out with, we've got zkAVMs coming online soon. We've got stuff growing all the time. People are really energized about various different things still. It doesn't really feel like a bear market on the fundamental side of things. So I think that the censorship stuff, because it's been such a big conversation lately and it's all over Twitter and everyone's fighting it and everyone's selling their own narrative, it definitely does overshadow all the really cool stuff that's happening. So I would suggest if you see people fighting it and just just saying absolute crap on Twitter about the censorship stuff and not actually adding anything to the conversation or any nuanced stuff, I mean, the way I do it is I just mute these people, to be honest, because if they're saying that, then they're really not worth listening to. And if you're getting exposed to a lot of it and you don't want to mute people, just keep in mind that you're just getting an influx of just bad information. You have to keep that in mind because what ends up happening is that if you're not conscious of it, that bad information starts clouding your judgment around things and you start feeling like things are worse than they are. And this is true for a lot of things. For example, everyone says that, the world is in a really shit place right now. Everything's going to shit. It's doomer everywhere. But I mean, yeah, okay. The world is, depending where you are in the world, it's worse than other places. Obviously, I mean, to use an obvious example here, if you're in Ukraine, it's worse than being a lot of other places right now. But I think the media and harps on about all this negative stuff because it gets more clicks, right? So then it influences your brain to think that things are worse than they are, when in reality, I think relative, the world is pretty much in the same place that it's been in, for the last few decades at least. And then I think it's actually gotten better, to be honest. But that's all incredibly complex. It can't just be boiled down into a headline. So you need to be conscious of these things, at least in my opinion, in order to save yourself from feeling doomer, feeling like the world's ending, feeling like everything's going to shit. Because it also affects your investing habits as well. Because I know people may think, oh my God, everything's going to end. I'm just going to go to cash and I'm just going to sit on it and I'm going to be safe there. But the problem with that strategy is, and again, this isn't investment advice. So the problem with that strategy is that you could be completely wrong, and then because you've gone into this, I guess, position based on what everyone's telling you, based on the media, it just ends up putting you in an even worse position. So you always need to take a balanced approach to these things. You need to be conscious of them. And just be conscious of your own biases, the information that you're exposed to, and go from there. It even applies to the refuel, guys. Obviously, I'm always going to give you the bullish Ethereum take. I will give you bearish takes from time to time, or at least I'll criticize things that I think deserve to be criticized. But obviously, I'm incredibly biased towards Ethereum. I can't remove that. It's just not going to happen. I can't be unbiased, and I admit that all the time. But you shouldn't take my word on anything. If I say something, you shouldn't take it as gospel. You should definitely corroborate that. You should definitely talk to people about it. Talk to people in the Daily Gwei Discord channel about it, which you can join as well if you haven't yet. But I guess as the main point is that applies to everything. Just don't get your information from one source. Don't think that what the media is selling you is the truth. Get out and touch some grass, as they say, because I think that's the best way to get ahead of that stuff. But anyway, enough lecturing for today. That's going to be it. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.